I still remember the moment, as if it was yesterday. I was in the office break room, standing by the coffee machine, adding a dash of oat milk to my morning blend. The caffeine hadn't quite hit yet, and I was already feeling the weight of the day ahead. I'd been working nonstop on an important project that had a tight deadline, something that required more than just a little overtime. The clock on the wall ticked steadily towards 8 p.m., and the office was almost empty, save for a few late-night workers hunched over their desks. It wasn't unusual for me. I'd been with the company for over 9 years, and I was used to long hours. That's when he walked in. Ryan. He was the CEO's son, recently promoted after his father decided to step down and pass the reins of the company to him. I had known him since he was a kid, running around the office building with his father on weekends. He'd grown up watching his father build the company from the ground up, and now, it seemed, the company was his. I had always respected Mr. Cole, his father, who had a quiet, calm demeanor. But Ryan? He was different, entitled, brash, and more concerned about image than substance. Ryan barely acknowledged my presence as he walked in. He didn't greet me or smile. It was as if I was just another office fixture, a part of the decor he'd been told to deal with. He glanced at me only briefly before speaking. "Lily, I need to see you in my office. Now." His tone wasn't a request. It was an order, one that left no room for hesitation. My heart skipped a beat, a sense of unease creeping up on me as I followed him down the hallway. The buzzing lights overhead seemed too loud, the echoes of our footsteps unusually sharp. Something felt off, but I couldn't place it. When we reached his office, he didn't even offer me a seat. He remained standing, his posture rigid, as if he was some sort of judge about to pass down a verdict. "You're fired," he said flatly, not even bothering to make eye contact. "We don't need lazy people dragging this company down. I'm restructuring, and you're part of the problem." I blinked, my mind racing. What was he talking about? I had been with the company for nearly a decade, dedicating my time and energy, building relationships, and managing some of the most important contracts in the company's history. My team respected me. My clients trusted me. And yet, here I was, being told I was a problem, without a single word of explanation. "Excuse me?" I finally found my voice, trying to mask the shock I felt. "You can't be serious. I've been here for years, working harder than anyone else." Ryan's eyes flickered over a stack of papers on his desk, flipping through them casually, as though I were some minor inconvenience in his day. "I'm serious," he said. "You can collect your things and leave immediately." The room spun around me. I wanted to shout. I wanted to demand an explanation, to ask how he could so casually dismiss everything I had worked for, everything I had given to this company. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. It was a calm smile, practiced over the years, the kind of smile that showed politeness, even in the face of an injustice. "Understood," I said, standing up and walking out of his office without another word. As I left, I passed by a few coworkers who had clearly noticed something was wrong. Some of them stood up, but I gave them a subtle shake of my head, signaling them to keep their distance. I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. I packed my desk in silence, my hands trembling ever so slightly as I put my personal items into a box. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear everything down. But instead, I calmly walked out of the building, my head held high, while inside, I was crumbling. The drive home was a blur. The streets looked different, and I felt disconnected, like I was walking through someone else's life. I kept replaying Ryan's words over and over in my head. Lazy. Dragging the company down. I couldn't make sense of it. My loyalty, my hard work, my dedication, they meant nothing. All those late nights, the personal sacrifices, the projects I had poured my heart into, they all seemed to disappear with one careless sentence. As I sat in my car, I fought back tears. I knew I had been blindsided, but what I didn't know was why. What was his reasoning? What had changed in him? And more importantly, how would he handle the consequences of his rash decision? I didn't have the answers then, but I was determined to find them. As the night stretched on, I barely slept. Instead, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was curious about why Ryan had fired me without understanding the consequences, curious about how he planned to handle the upcoming Kingswell deal. He was set to finalize it, and I was the only one with the expertise to close it. Did he even know that? The more I thought about it, the more something inside me began to shift. A sense of control, a feeling that I wasn't done yet, began to take root. Ryan may have fired me, but he had no idea what he had just set in motion. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, the thought that kept me awake was clear. He had made a mistake, and I was going to make sure he knew it. As I drove home, the weight of the firing seemed to settle deeper with each passing mile. The cool night air that drifted in through the cracked window did little to clear the fog in my mind. I should have been angry, shouldn't I? I should have been furious, maybe even devastated. But all I felt was this gnawing sense of unfairness. I had given so much to that company. It wasn't just a job for me. It has been my life, my career, my family, in many ways. I had worked through sickness, through personal loss, through stressful weeks and endless hours. I had built relationships, secured contracts, managed clients, and stayed loyal. I was a part of the fabric of that company, and they just let me go as if I had never mattered. I passed by the familiar landmarks, places that once signified success, now just markers of a chapter that had ended abruptly. My thoughts were all over the place. How could Ryan have done this? Was this just a case of him stepping into his father's shoes and wanting to make a big move? Or was there something personal behind it? I couldn't understand why he had fired me without any real reason. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was being treated as disposable. I wasn't just an employee. I had been there when the company struggled, when it thrived, and when it lost clients. I had helped it grow, and I had built the relationships that made it all work. Yet, here I was out in the cold, with nothing more than a vague explanation about company restructuring. The more I reflected, the more I felt like a fool. Was Ryan just playing power games, or was he completely oblivious to the impact of his decision? I knew the Kingswell project was critical, and I was the one leading the charge. Without me, the deal could very well fall apart. Was Ryan aware of that? Did he even care? I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, sitting for a moment in the silence of the car. The only sound was my breath, steady but heavy in my chest. The injustice stung, but what hurt more was how easily Ryan had let me go. One day, I was a valued part of the team, and the next, I was nothing. Before I could even gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. My mind was still reeling from everything that had happened, but I couldn't ignore the call. Lily, the voice on the other end said, and immediately, I knew who it was. Mr. Cole, the CEO, and Ryan's father. I just heard about what happened. Why did you leave the office? His voice was tight with emotion, a mix of anger and concern. I was fired, I replied, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Ryan let me go. There was a long pause before Mr. Cole spoke again, and when he did, I could hear the frustration in his tone. What do you mean, fired? That doesn't make sense. I'm not aware of any decision to fire you. I didn't authorize it. Ryan was supposed to have a meeting with you today, but I didn't expect this. I frowned, my heart pounding a little faster. Ryan didn't know? I asked, incredulous. Did he even look at my contract? No, Mr. Cole replied, his voice full of regret. I don't think he understood the full scope of your role. He hasn't read the Kingswell contract, has he? My stomach dropped. The Kingswell project was one of the biggest deals we had in the pipeline. It was close to being finalized, and I had personally overseen every step of the process. Without me, the entire deal could fall apart. I had worked for months building rapport with the client, understanding their needs, and finalizing the terms. I was the one with the knowledge and the authority to close it. No, he didn't, I said, the realization dawning on me. Ryan didn't even know I was the only one authorized to finalize that deal. Exactly, Mr. Cole said, his voice softening. Ryan has no idea what he's done. And now we're in a tight spot. The Kingswell deal is on the line, and you're the only one who can save it. You need to come back in. I know this was all a mistake, and I need you to finish what you started. I stayed silent for a moment, my mind racing. I was still processing everything, how Ryan had treated me, how he'd thought he could just cast me aside without understanding the full implications. But now, there was something else that had taken root inside me. It wasn't just about going back to my old job. It wasn't just about saving the Kingswell deal. It was about taking control, about showing them that I was not just a cog in the machine that they could discard whenever they pleased. I'll come back, I said finally, my voice steady and clear. But not just to get my job back. I'll come back on my terms. I want to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I'll only finalize the Kingswell deal under specific conditions. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear Mr. Cole processing my words, weighing them. You have my word, he said after a moment. I'll make sure everything is in writing. You'll have full autonomy on the deal. No interference. That was all I needed to hear. I hung up the phone and sat there for a few minutes, reflecting on the conversation. This was it. I wasn't going back to that office to beg for my job or apologize. I was going back to take control of my future, to show them that I was more than just someone they could fire on a whim. Ryan had made a mistake, and now it was time for him to realize the consequences. Emily sat in her apartment, the dim light of the late afternoon filtering through the blinds. She hadn't been able to shake the sting of Ryan's words and the coldness of the firing. But instead of letting the anger consume her, she sat still, focused, and resolved to take her time. She wasn't going to rush back into the office and play by Ryan's rules. He had made his move. Now it was time for her to make hers. It was strange how calm she felt, even though the betrayal still echoed in her chest. She was hurt. There was no denying that. She had given so much to the company, poured her heart and soul into every deal, every client, every project. But it wasn't just about that. It was about respect, about dignity. It was about the fact that she wasn't some expendable employee, that her years of hard work should mean more than a sudden dismissal based on the whims of an unqualified CEO's son. She opened her laptop and pulled up her contract, the document she hadn't needed to think about in years. She had always assumed that her role was secure, that her position in the company was untouchable. But now, with Ryan's impulsive decision hanging over her, she needed to be certain. As she read the terms, her eyes locked onto the clause that made her stomach twist. She was the sole negotiator for the Kingswell deal. Without her, the deal couldn't go through. Ryan's ignorance of this fact was not just a mistake, it was a massive oversight. And Emily knew that if she played her cards right, she could use it to her advantage. But as she reread the contract, the hurt of the dismissal resurfaced. She'd been loyal for so long, had weathered every storm, and now this. It stung. She couldn't understand how Ryan, with no experience, could just walk in and make such a reckless decision. The thought of him running the company like this, making snap judgments without understanding the consequences, brought a bitter taste to her mouth. But then, amidst the hurt, Emily saw the opportunity. Ryan was vulnerable. He didn't know the first thing about the business. He had no idea what it took to maintain the clients they had, what it took to close the big deals. He'd made a massive mistake by firing her, one he couldn't take back. And now, Emily could use that to her advantage. She wasn't going back to that office to beg for her job. No, she was going back to show them her worth. Her mind churned with the possibilities as she planned her next steps. She had a unique chance to take control, to prove to them that they needed her, that she was irreplaceable. The more she thought about it, the more empowered she felt. She wasn't going to be just another employee anymore. She was going to be the one who controlled her destiny. She reached for her phone and dialed Mr. Cole's number. He had already apologized for Ryan's actions, but Emily knew that apologies weren't enough. She needed to ensure that her return was on her terms. After everything that had happened, she wouldn't settle for less. Mr. Cole, she said as he answered, I'm willing to come back to finalize the Kingswell deal, but only if we can agree on a new contract. I want full autonomy on the deal and no interference from Ryan. There was a pause on the other end of the line before he spoke. You have my word, Emily. I'll make sure everything is in writing. You'll have full control over the Kingswell account, and I'll make it clear to Ryan that he is to stay out of it. Her heart rate quickened as she felt the weight of the moment settle on her. This wasn't just about securing the deal. It was about taking back control, about making sure that no one ever underestimated her again. She had fought hard for everything she had built, and now it was time to make sure that the people who had dismissed her knew just how much she brought to the table. As she hung up the phone, Emily felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in days. She wasn't going back to the office as a passive employee, just trying to get her job back. No, she was going back as someone who knew her value. She was going to change the game. She looked out the window at the quiet city below. The world had been moving on, indifferent to her struggles, to her pain. But now it felt like things were finally shifting. She had the upper hand. She had power. And she wasn't about to waste it. Emily walked through the main entrance of the office, her heels clicking against the marble floors, echoing louder than usual in the stillness of the building. It was quiet for a moment, then she noticed the whispers, the subtle glances as her colleagues looked up from their desks. The atmosphere had shifted. It was like walking into a new world, one where her presence commanded attention. She wasn't just returning to work. She was making a statement. Instead of slipping back through the employee entrance like she might have done in the past, Emily chose to make her entrance through the front doors. She held her head high, shoulders back, and walked confidently through the lobby. Her steps were steady, each one filled with purpose. The receptionist, who had never made eye contact with her before, now greeted her with an almost nervous smile. The few staff members who lingered in the area paused their conversations and looked at her. Some gave hesitant nods, while others simply stared in stunned silence. Emily wasn't just walking back into the office. She was making it clear that she had returned on her own terms. As she made her way down the hall toward her department, she felt a strange sense of calm. The anger from being fired still lingered in the back of her mind, but it was no longer the driving force. She had moved past the hurt. Now, it was all about taking control of the situation. She had leverage, and she intended to use it. Ryan's carelessness had set the stage, and now she was going to be the one to call the shots. She rounded the corner into the open-plan office, and that's when she saw him. Ryan was standing by the coffee machine, his posture stiff as he glanced up and caught sight of her walking toward him. His face paled instantly, the color draining from his cheeks. He froze, then blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what was happening. "Emily," Ryan said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I didn't expect you to come back. I didn't mean for things to go like this." Emily stopped in front of him, meeting his gaze calmly. There was no rush in her movements, no urgency to respond. She simply stood there, her expression composed. She had nothing to say to him at that moment, not yet. Instead, she gave a faint smile, a smile that barely touched her lips, as she waited for him to continue. "I'm sorry," Ryan stammered. "I was hasty. I didn't know the full picture. I made a mistake." Emily said nothing for a long beat. She could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that he had messed up beyond repair. But Emily wasn't interested in his apology. She wasn't interested in hearing him squirm. She had already decided how this would go down. "You did," she replied, her voice steady, calm, and unwavering. "But your mistake won't be my problem. I'm here to finish the Kingswell deal. That's my priority, not your apologies." Ryan's mouth hung open as if he couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. He opened his mouth to protest, to offer some other excuse, but Emily raised her hand slightly, signaling him to stop. "I'm not here for you, Ryan," she continued, her voice softer but no less firm. "I'm here because I built this. I worked for this. And now it's time for you to see just how much I am worth." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado nowhere to be found. Emily watched him closely, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. He had underestimated her, brushed her aside as if she was easily replaceable. Now, the power had shifted, and he was on the losing side of that equation. She walked past him without another word, her mind laser-focused on the Kingswell deal. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon, and there was no time to waste. As she passed her colleagues, she noticed their eyes on her. Some looked at her with admiration, others with uncertainty. Emily didn't care what they thought anymore. They had seen the rise and fall of a CEO's son, and now they were going to witness her reclaim her place in the company. She wasn't just returning for a meeting. She was going to show them all that her worth had never been tied to Ryan's impulsive decision. Ryan's attempt at an apology had been just that, an attempt. He didn't realize it yet, but Emily had already won. The game had changed. He was no longer in control, and that realization would be his downfall. Emily had the upper hand, and she was ready to play her cards. The conference room was charged with an electric tension as the Kingswell deal meeting began. Emily sat at the head of the table, her posture confident, her eyes sharp with focus. As the lead negotiator, she had spent months preparing for this moment, understanding every nuance of the deal. This wasn't just another business deal for her. This was her proving ground, her chance to reclaim her power after being unceremoniously fired by Ryan, the CEO's son, the day before. The room was filled with the Kingswell representatives, their expressions unreadable as they waited for the proceedings to begin. Ryan stood in the corner, arms crossed, his gaze flickering uneasily between Emily and the team. He had tried to interfere earlier, but Emily had silenced him with a calm authority that he hadn't expected. This was her territory now. She wasn't just here to negotiate, she was here to show them all that she was indispensable. Emily cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "Thank you for joining us today. I'm confident that we can finalize this deal to our mutual benefit," she said, her voice steady and clear.
She didn't look at Ryan.
She didn't need to. Her focus was on the clients in front of her, not the man who had been foolish enough to underestimate her. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in the corner, but Emily didn't acknowledge him. She continued to lead the meeting, discussing terms, making adjustments, and addressing concerns with an ease that made it look effortless. Her years of experience were evident, and it was clear that the Kingswell team respected her knowledge and approach. They were hanging on her every word, nodding and making notes as she spoke. This was her moment, and she was owning it. Ryan's attempts to interject had become increasingly desperate. At one point, he leaned forward and attempted to take control of the conversation, but Emily shut him down with a simple, "Ryan, I've got this." The words were polite, but there was a firmness in her tone that left no room for argument. Ryan's face flushed red, his bravado slowly crumbling as he realized that his position in the company was now tenuous at best. Emily felt a surge of satisfaction, but she didn't let it show. She was still hurt by his betrayal, still grappling with the shock of being fired without cause. But she wasn't going to let him see that. She had bigger things to focus on, like closing this deal and proving her worth. She wasn't just working for the company anymore. She was working for herself, reclaiming the respect she had earned but been denied. As the meeting went on, it became increasingly clear that Emily was the one in control. Her calm demeanor and expert knowledge left the Kingswell team impressed. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed like a child trying to play in a game he didn't understand. Every time he tried to push his agenda, Emily calmly corrected him or redirected the conversation, solidifying her position as the one who knew the most about this deal. Ryan's frustration was palpable, but Emily didn't let it affect her. She focused on the deal, on her goals, and on proving to herself and everyone else that she was the one who had the power here. As the meeting drew to a close, the Kingswell representatives seemed satisfied. They stood and shook her hand, praising her expertise and professionalism. Emily smiled, her mind already moving on to the next step. As they filed out of the room, Ryan remained behind, standing by the door, his expression one of barely contained anger. "I don't know how you did that," he muttered under his breath, "but I'll make sure this never happens again." Emily didn't flinch. She met his gaze with a calm intensity. "You've already made your move, Ryan. I'm just here to finish what you started." Ryan opened his mouth to retort, but the words caught in his throat. Emily walked past him, her step steady, her resolve unshaken. She had just shown him, and everyone else, that she was more than capable of handling things on her own. She didn't need him. She never had. The meeting had been a success, but more importantly, it had been a victory for Emily. She had reclaimed her power, and Ryan's downfall had begun. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. After Emily's successful negotiation of the Kingswell deal, things began to shift at the company. Ryan, once the golden boy, now found himself surrounded by doubt. Whispers of his impulsive decisions and his failed leadership started to circulate, and his authority was questioned in ways it never had been before. The once confident CEO's son, who had walked into the office with such bravado, now seemed small, struggling to maintain his grip on the company. Employees who had once held his every word in reverence now exchanged knowing glances, some speaking in hushed tones about his failure to recognize Emily's role in the company. Ethan, one of the senior executives who had always sided with Ryan, now found himself in a position he never expected. The confidence he once had in Ryan's leadership quickly turned into desperation. Ethan had seen the cracks in Ryan's facade before, but the damage was becoming undeniable. Ryan had sabotaged Emily, and in doing so, had jeopardized everything. Now, Ethan was forced to walk the tightrope, trying to salvage Ryan's reputation while the company around them slowly shifted allegiance. Ryan, ever defiant, tried his best to salvage his status, but his efforts were futile. He made calls to key clients, promising new directions, attempting to reassure those within the company that his decisions would bring success. But it was too late. Emily had proved herself in ways that Ryan had never even attempted. She had handled the Kingswell deal like a seasoned expert, while Ryan floundered. His words lost their power, and every time he tried to convince someone of his vision, the evidence of his rash decisions weighed heavier on his shoulders. As the days passed, Emily began to reflect on her position. She didn't want to see Ryan fail. He was, after all, the son of the founder, someone she had respected for years. She had even mentored him, given him advice when he first entered the company. But his actions, his lack of foresight, his disregard for the employees who had helped build the company, were too damaging to ignore. Emily couldn't afford to let personal feelings cloud her judgment. She had always placed the company's survival above all else, and now it was her responsibility to ensure it endured, even if that meant standing up to Ryan. Ryan's influence continued to slip, his decisions growing more erratic as his authority weakened. He tried to hold on to his power, but it was clear that the tides had turned. It wasn't just Emily who had recognized this shift. Mr. Cole, the CEO and Ryan's father, could see that the company was at a crossroads. Emily's professionalism and steady leadership had saved the company from disaster, and Ryan's impulsiveness had nearly led them to ruin. With Ryan's position more precarious than ever, Mr. Cole had to make a difficult choice. He knew that to save the company, Ryan could no longer lead. Emily had proved her ability to lead the company's client strategy with poise and intelligence, and now Mr. Cole was ready to make her an offer she couldn't refuse. He reached out to Emily, offering her a promotion to lead the company's entire client strategy, a role that would put her in charge of shaping the company's future. The offer was tempting, but it wasn't without its challenges. Emily knew that taking the position meant taking on more responsibility, both professionally and personally. She would have to navigate the power struggles within the company, confront Ryan, and rebuild the team that had been fractured by his erratic leadership. It wasn't a decision she could make lightly. But as she sat in Mr. Cole's office, listening to his pitch, Emily realized something. The future of the company no longer rested in Ryan's hands. It was in hers. For the first time in years, Emily understood her power, not just to lead but to reshape the company's destiny. She had the ability to fix what had been broken, to turn the ship around, and to guide the company into a new era of growth and success. With that realization, Emily knew what she had to do. The company's future rested on her shoulders, and she was ready to take the reins. The game had changed, and she was no longer a player waiting for permission. She was the one calling the shots. Emily walked into the boardroom with a steady breath, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. This was it, the final meeting. She had been invited by Mr. Cole to discuss the company's future, to determine how they would move forward after everything that had transpired. But there was one major issue that had to be addressed: Ryan. Today was the day she would hold him accountable for his actions, for the damage he'd caused, and for the role he played in nearly bringing the company to its knees. The boardroom was filled with key executives, each one quietly aware that this meeting would determine not just the fate of the company, but their own roles moving forward. Mr. Cole sat at the head of the table, his expression a mix of concern and resignation. Ryan, who had once been so confident, now appeared tense, his usual arrogance replaced by uncertainty. He knew what was coming, he had to. Emily stood tall at the front of the room, her eyes scanning the faces of the board members. They were waiting for her to speak, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to reflect on everything that had led up to this. The unfair dismissal, the sabotage, the struggle. And now, here she was, poised to take control of her destiny and the company's future. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today," Emily began, her voice clear and measured. "But before we move forward with any discussions about the company's future, we need to address the elephant in the room. Ryan's actions have cost this company far more than anyone realizes." She looked directly at Ryan, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His face had lost its color, his usual cockiness now replaced with a nervous edge. "I've been silent about this until now," Emily continued, "but it's time we set the record straight. Ryan made a rash decision to fire me without understanding my role in the Kingswell deal, a decision that almost caused us to lose our biggest contract in years." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in. The room was silent, all eyes on her. "I was the one who negotiated the terms, built the relationships, and made this deal happen," Emily said, her voice gaining strength. "Ryan didn't read the contract, didn't understand the importance of my role, and now he's paying the price. The company's future was nearly jeopardized because of his lack of foresight, and now he has the nerve to sit here, expecting things to just go back to normal." Ryan tried to speak, but Emily raised her hand to silence him. "I'm not done, Ryan. You're not just my colleague. You're the son of the CEO, and you've been given an enormous amount of power. But power without responsibility is dangerous. You used your position to push me out, not knowing that you were tearing down the very foundation of the company." There was a moment of silence as Emily's words hung in the air. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and apprehension. Emily was laying it all out there. There was no turning back now. Ryan's eyes were wide, but he didn't speak. His hands were clenched in his lap, his mouth tight. Emily could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but she wasn't afraid. She knew what had to be done. "Ryan," Emily said, her tone softening but firm, "I'm not here to destroy you. I don't want you to fail, but you need to face the consequences of your actions. You sabotaged me, and in doing so, you nearly sabotaged everything this company stands for." Ryan's face hardened, but Emily could see the cracks in his facade. He knew she was right. The truth was undeniable. "I've spent years building this company, fighting for every inch of success," Emily continued. "I've put in the work, the sacrifice, the dedication. And I'm not going to let your recklessness undo all of that. Not on my watch." She turned to Mr. Cole, who had been listening quietly. "Mr. Cole, it's time for us to make a choice. The future of this company depends on leadership, accountability, and integrity. If we allow someone like Ryan to continue unchecked, we'll fall apart. But if we choose someone who knows the value of hard work and responsibility, we can rebuild." Mr. Cole nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on Emily. He had heard her loud and clear. "Ryan," he said, his voice grave, "we cannot continue with you in charge. Your actions have put everything we've worked for in jeopardy. It's time for you to go." Ryan's face turned crimson, his hands balled into fists, but he said nothing. He knew he had lost. Emily had won, not just the battle, but the war. As Ryan stood up and left the room in silence, Emily's heart raced. She had done it. The company's future now rested in her hands. She had proven her worth and taken control. With a quiet resolve, Emily turned back to the board, her eyes steady and determined. It's time for a new chapter. And with that, the company's future was reshaped. With Ryan out of the picture, Emily found herself at the helm of the company, a position she had never imagined she would hold. She stood in the office, looking out at the city skyline, contemplating how far she had come. From being dismissed by a careless decision to being the one who would now lead the company, she had transformed from a vulnerable employee to a powerful leader. But the road ahead was about more than just business success. It was about creating something that would last, a culture built on trust, respect, and integrity. The first step in Emily's leadership was rebuilding the company's internal structure. She knew that in order to move forward, she had to restore the employees' trust in the organization. She set clear expectations, focused on open communication, and ensured that everyone had a voice. Transparency became her mantra. No one would feel left in the dark again, as she had been. Emily made it clear that every employee's contributions were valuable, no matter their title or position. She implemented a feedback system and began regular meetings with team leaders to ensure that all concerns were addressed promptly. There would be no more games, no more secrets. She worked tirelessly to dismantle the toxic remnants left by Ryan's short reign. The office atmosphere, once thick with tension and whispers, began to change. People who had been afraid to speak up now felt empowered. Her leadership didn't just address the company's bottom line, it addressed the people who made up that bottom line. She ensured that every team member knew that they were part of something bigger than themselves, a company where respect, integrity, and hard work would always come first. As Emily watched the transformation unfold, she couldn't help but reflect on her own journey. The past few months have been a whirlwind. She had gone from being blindsided by betrayal to leading the charge for a company-wide revival. She had faced Ryan's sabotage and come out stronger. But more than anything, she had learned how to use her experiences, both good and bad, to fuel her growth as a leader. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader, someone who had earned her position through determination, grit, and a deep commitment to doing what was right. The personal growth Emily had experienced was monumental. She had learned to trust herself, to stand firm in her decisions, and to never let anyone undermine her worth again. She had developed a new sense of resilience, knowing that even in the face of betrayal, she could rise and lead with purpose. Emily understood now that her strength lay not just in her expertise, but in her ability to create an environment where others could thrive. The company was better than ever. Client relationships were stronger, and morale among employees was at an all-time high. They respected Emily not just for her intelligence, but for her fairness and integrity. And the results were clear. The Kingswell deal, which had once seemed like a distant dream, was the first of many successful ventures under Emily's leadership. Looking at the thriving office, Emily felt a deep sense of pride. She had taken the company from a period of uncertainty to one of stability and growth. She had transformed the culture from one that was toxic and divisive to one that was collaborative and empowering. But more than anything, she had created a legacy that would endure. Emily was building something more than just profits. She was building a foundation based on the values that mattered most to her: honesty, respect, and hard work. The future was now hers to shape. The company would continue to grow, but so would she, both as a leader and as a person. Emily knew that her journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the worst, and now she was ready for whatever challenges the future would bring. And as she stood there, looking out at the skyline, Emily knew that she had finally created the legacy she had always wanted, a legacy of integrity, strength, and respect. Emily stood at the edge of her office, gazing out the window at the city below. The hustle of the streets seemed distant now, almost surreal. She had once been a part of that chaos, caught up in the whirlwind of uncertainty and struggle, but now she was the one who had reshaped her world, her company, and her future. The challenges she had faced were still vivid in her mind: the pain of being fired, the fight for control, the battles against a system that had been rigged against her. Yet, standing here now, she realized that those struggles had been the very things that had shaped her into the leader she was today. She had come a long way since that fateful day when Ryan had fired her, unaware of her crucial role in the company's success. What had seemed like an end had, in reality, been the beginning of something much greater. The Kingswell deal was a turning point, but it wasn't just about securing that deal. It was about taking back her power, redefining what leadership meant, and creating a company culture that valued respect, integrity, and transparency. Emily knew now that true leadership wasn't about titles or power. It was about standing firm in your convictions, knowing your worth, and creating space for others to rise alongside you. As she reflected on everything she had accomplished, Emily realized that the impact she had made went beyond the deals and the numbers. She had changed the company's culture. She had created an environment where people were encouraged to speak up, where transparency was the norm, and where loyalty and hard work were truly valued. That, to her, was the most important accomplishment. The Kingswell deal had been a triumph, but the real success lay in the culture she had built, one that would outlast any single deal or project. The decision to stay or leave the company had been a difficult one. She had rebuilt everything, given everything she had to make this company successful, but there was still a part of her that wondered if it was time to move on, to find new challenges. Emily had proven to herself that she could lead, that she could take control, and that she could make a difference. But now, as the company thrived under her leadership, she couldn't help but wonder what else was out there. Could she find a new challenge that would push her even further? Or had she already achieved everything she needed within these walls? As the days passed, Emily's answer became clear. She had created something extraordinary here. She had turned a company that was on the brink of collapse into a thriving, dynamic organization, and she had done it on her own terms. But her legacy wasn't just about what she had built. It was about the path she had paved for others to follow. Emily had set the stage for future leaders, those who would follow in her footsteps and continue the work she had started. She had shown them what true leadership looked like, one rooted in integrity, respect, and a commitment to doing what was right. The company was no longer just a place where people came to work. It was a place where people could grow, where their contributions were valued, and where they could make a real impact. And as Emily looked back at everything she had accomplished, she knew that she had created something that would endure long after she was gone. With a final glance at the city below, Emily made her decision. She wasn't going anywhere. She had found her purpose here, and there was still so much more to do. The company had a future now, a future she had built, and one she would continue to shape. She had not only turned the tables on Ryan and his reckless decisions, but she had also set the stage for others to rise. Emily had created a path for future leaders, one that would guide them toward success, not through manipulation or sabotage, but through hard work, respect, and integrity. Emily's legacy wasn't just about the company's growth. It was about the people she had empowered, the lives she had touched, and the culture she had created. She knew that true success didn't come from titles or power. It came from standing by your principles and helping others do the same. And as she took her seat at the head of the company's table, Emily knew that her work was far from over. The real work, the work that would define her legacy, was just beginning. If you found Emily's journey inspiring and empowering, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. It really helps us keep bringing you these stories of strength and resilience. And if you want to see more incredible transformations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. Your support means the world to us. Thank you.